US goes after Maduro like a cartel boss, not a head of state, and the Middle East is watching. The United States did not arrest Nicolás Maduro. It did something more radical. By indicting Venezuela's sitting president as a narco-terrorist, Washington quietly redefined the boundaries of sovereignty itself, treating a head of state not as a political adversary, but as the leader of a criminal enterprise. No troops moved, no government fell, and yet a precedent was set whose implications stretch far beyond Caracas, reaching deep into Tehran, Moscow, and the future of how power is exercised in an era where the law has become a geopolitical weapon. In recent days, international media has buzzed with claims that the United States had finally taken down Venezuela's strongman. From Miami to Madrid, Venezuelans in exile celebrated what many hoped was the end of a repressive regime, while allies of Caracas decried imperial overreach and a violation of sovereignty. The reality, however, was both less dramatic and more consequential. There was no raid, no arrest, no handcuffs. Instead, Washington wielded a different weapon: the law. In March 2020, the United States crossed a line it had long avoided. It indicted a sitting foreign president on charges of narco-terrorism, large-scale drug trafficking, and a conspiracy with designated terrorist organizations. U.S. prosecutors alleged that Maduro presided over a state-embedded criminal network, the so-called Cartel of the Suns, that allegedly used cocaine trafficking not merely for profit, but as a means of deliberately harming the United States. A reward was offered for information leading to his arrest. No international tribunal was involved. No regime change followed, but the message was unmistakable. You see, what made the indictment extraordinary was not the legal tool itself. U.S. courts have long asserted jurisdiction over foreign conspiracies that intentionally target the United States, particularly in narcotics cases. What was unprecedented was the target. A sitting head of state exercising effective control over his country was reclassified not as a sovereign adversary, but as the leader of a transnational criminal enterprise, treated less like a president, rather a cartel boss with a flag. And that distinction matters. Maduro was not indicted simply because he was authoritarian, corrupt, or brutal. Many leaders fit that description without ever facing criminal charges in the US. He was indicted because Washington chose to define his regime as criminal, and because it did so in a place where geography still matters. For much of the post-Cold War era, U.S. foreign policy rested on liberal internationalist assumptions. Under President Barack Obama, Washington emphasized multilateral legitimacy and diplomacy, even with adversarial regimes. Venezuela was sanctioned and isolated, but its leadership was not criminally prosecuted. Accountability was expected to emerge through international pressure, negotiations, or internal political change, not unilateral legal action. However, President Donald Trump reversed that hierarchy. His administration emphasized jurisdiction, leverage, and proximity over norms. The revival of the Monroe Doctrine was explicit and unapologetic. The United States, Trump officials argued, would no longer tolerate hostile powers embedding themselves in the Western Hemisphere. Venezuela, therefore, became a test case. The Maduro regime had fused state institutions with systematic criminality. Senior military and political figures were credibly implicated in drug trafficking, money laundering, and arms coordination with non-state actors. Venezuelan territory became a permissive environment for sanctions evasion, hosting Iranian and Hezbollah-linked facilitators, enabling illicit oil sales and offering strategic access to Russia and China in the Western Hemisphere. In Washington's view, this was no longer a normal state behaving badly. It was a platform state, sovereign in form, but criminal in function. And politics smoothed the legal path. Following Venezuela's deeply disputed 2018 election, the United States and dozens of other democracies refused to recognize Maduro as the country's legitimate president, instead backing opposition leader Juan Guaido as the interim head of state. This mattered profoundly. Non-recognition weakened any claim to head of state immunity, allowing U.S. prosecutors to fuse recognition policy and criminal law into a single instrument of pressure. There were precedents, though none quite like this. Manuel Noriega was indicted while still in power and later captured during a U.S. invasion. Slobodan Milosevic was indicted by an international tribunal and arrested only after losing office. Vladimir Putin now carries an ICC arrest warrant, yet no country has attempted a unilateral domestic indictment. Even the U.S. killing of Iranian Qasem Soleimani followed a different logic: military action, not judicial criminalization. The Maduro case sits uneasily among them: unilateral, preventative, and aimed less at arrest, rather delegitimization. Oil inevitably looms in the background, though its role is often overstated. Yes, Venezuela holds the world's largest proven reserves, and a post-Maduro reintegration into Western energy markets would carry global implications. Combined with U.S. production and allied Gulf output, alignment with Venezuelan oil could exert sustained downward pressure on prices, weakening petrostates whose power depends on high revenues. notably Russia and Iran. How central this calculus was to Washington's decision remains unclear. Reducing the indictment to energy geopolitics would be simplistic, but pretending oil was irrelevant would similarly be naive. And this sharpens the central ambiguity. Was the Maduro indictment a universal stand against rogue regimes or a forceful reassertion of America's sphere of influence? Right now, the evidence points to the latter. Washington has tolerated egregious abuses elsewhere without criminally indicting sitting leaders. What distinguishes Venezuela is not only the scale of the criminality, but its location. You see, geography came first, norms followed. And this approach carries risks. If the United States can criminally reclassify a regime it deems illegitimate, what prevents others from doing the same? What stops Russia, China, or Iran from asserting expansive jurisdiction, indicting rivals under domestic law, and cloaking power politics in legal language? The uncomfortable answer is little, except power. The United States can enforce its claims because of its financial reach and central role in the global system. Others may lack that reach, but the precedent still fragments international norms into competing legal universes. To allay concerns that criminalization is a pretext for indefinite influence, Washington would do well to make clear, quickly and credibly, that its objective is the transfer of authority to a legitimate, broadly supported Venezuelan government. Which brings the argument inevitably to Tehran. Venezuela did not merely sympathize with Iran, it became operationally intertwined with it, serving as a hub for sanctions evasion, covert energy swaps, aviation links, and Hezbollah-linked activity. Iran itself presides over a system that blends state power with terrorism, illicit finance, proxy warfare, and repression at home. As renewed unrest grips the Islamic Republic, its response, mass arrests, executions, and information blackouts, reflects the same logic it applies abroad. Coercion as governance. Are Iranian leaders alarmed by the Maduro precedent? Publicly, perhaps not. Privately, they would be foolish not to be. The indictment subtly challenges a long-held assumption that sovereignty and distance guarantee legal insulation. Geography and escalation risk still impose limits, but the direction of travel is unmistakable. President Joe Biden had softened the rhetoric and reopened selective diplomatic channels, including limited sanctions relief tied to oil, yet the indictment remained. That continuity suggested something deeper than partisan politics. Once a regime is criminally reclassified, returning it to normal diplomacy becomes extraordinarily difficult. The revival of the Monroe Doctrine did not arrive with a speech. It arrived with an indictment, and the lesson is not that the United States will pursue tyrants everywhere, but that in its own backyard, it is prepared to treat certain regimes not as sovereign adversaries, but as criminal enterprises. For leaders in Tehran and beyond, that may be the most unsettling insight of all. For more insights, I'm Dan Feferman from Middle East 24. For more insights, information, analysis, and breaking news on the Middle East and beyond, make sure to follow Middle East 24 on X, on Instagram. Make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow our podcast, The Middle East Breakdown, on Spotify or wherever you get your podcasts. And you can go to our website, middleeast24.org, and register for our new and upcoming newsletter.